Well, it's officially screaming hot here in Australia, and I know it's not that hot in the Northern Hemisphere right now, but it doesn't matter what time of year it is, it's always a good idea to get outside and grill some meat with your mates. So today I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite cuts of lamb with 3 different barbecue methods, so stick around because there's something for everyone in this one. Huge thank you to Australian Lamb for sponsoring this video. Let's get stuck in. So first up, we've got the lamb rump steak. Now, the reason I love lamb rumps is because they are, completely boneless, but they've got a good amount of lovely fat on them, so they don't dry out. This is a common cut of meat you find in restaurants, but you don't find it in supermarkets. You're gonna have to go to your butcher for this one. And a lamb rump's actually quite a large piece of meat, so you can talk to your butcher about trimming them how you want them. I like them trimmed pretty aggressively for what we're doing. You can see here, there's a lot of the fats come off the top. You don't want a huge amount of fat. You want about 1/2 centimeter. That's this much in the other system. You want it to render out the fat. And we're gonna cook these like a steak, so they're not gonna take a great amount of time to cook, so you can't have heaps of fat on there or it just won't render out in time. But again, go to your butcher, because they're gonna be your best resource for this stuff. So we're gonna do a real simple Mediterranean-inspired marinade. Olive oil, decent amount, 3 tablespoons. Oregano, or oregano, a decent amount, say 1 tablespoon. Pinch of salt, and then the juice and zest of a couple of lemons. The juice is gonna help tenderize the meat. Then just give that a mix, mainly so that salt dissolves. In these go. Make sure they're completely covered in your marinade, and then we're gonna chuck them in the fridge. I think you only want to marinate this for sort of 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours, 3 hours kind of max. And the reason being is that there's a lot of lemon juice in here. And I feel like sometimes if you put a lot of acid into meat marinades, it can start really breaking down the proteins, and you just lose a bit of texture more than anything. So these have been in the fridge for an hour and a half. So talk about grill setup quickly. I've got one side of my grill with all the charcoal and one side free, no charcoal. Why? Because we want to render some of the fat out. So we're going to start them over here, but we're going to pretty quickly end up with a bit of a fat fire. As soon as it starts flaming up, we're going to move them over there to continue sealing them. We don't want flames when we're cooking over wood or charcoal. Every time I do a photo shoot with a photographer, they're like, make the flames, and it's kind of the opposite of what you want. You want good, hot, burning embers. You don't want flames, because flames just kind of char things too much. So we're going to start with the fat side down over the hot side. I like my lamb kind of blushing pink. I guess you'd call it medium in the beefsteak world. I think if lamb's too rare, it does get a bit chewy and isn't great for the mouth, in my opinion. So I kind of cook my lamb to a temperature of about 48 degrees Celsius internal on the grill, and then I'll let them rest for 5 to 10 minutes before we carve them and ready to go. You can definitely cook this in a pan if you want to. It will be smoky in your house. See here, we're starting to get some flames. They're manageable at the moment, but we'll keep an eye on that. But you can do it in a pan, same thing applies. I'd start in a medium heat temperature pan, fat side down, render the fat before you start flipping them, and I'd have your oven ready to go as well. You'd probably finish them in the oven. As soon as that fat starts to go, we don't want that. We don't want to cook in that. The other way you can do it is cook it under your grill or broiler. Similar thing, but you do it fat side up, render the fat before flipping them and finishing them like that. But I think if I was to cook them at home and I didn't have a barbecue, I'd be doing them in a pan. Once we're starting to get some fat rendering, we can start flipping. I think it's a common misconception that you only flip a steak or a lamb rump like this once. When you flip stuff often when you're grilling it, you're gonna get a much more even cook, rather than have a piece of meat and you're cooking it mainly from one side, then just quickly finish it on the other side. Personally, I prefer to flip it often and you get a more even cook. The only piece of meat that I think it works well with is a piece of fish when you're trying to get crispy skin. And you can see, as soon as I flip that, and the fat side's up, we're not getting anywhere near as much flame. We're at 48, I'm gonna pull these off and then let them rest. And you can see here, great color, fat's nice and rendered. We try to get char on all sides. That took about 15, 16 minutes to be perfectly honest. Kind of rotate them slowly, letting them render. And we wanna rest these for a good, at least 8 minutes, like half the amount of time that you cook them for. I know people are always like, it's gonna be cold then, but just trust me, if you rest it, when you cut it, you're gonna get less bleed out and it's not gonna dry out as fast. So rest them for a good 8 minutes. If you want it to be still really, really hot, just pop them back on for another like 1 minute on all sides, because the center of that piece of meat ain't getting cold in 8 to 15 minutes, to be perfectly honest. So rest them, we'll come back and we'll slice. So these have rested. I'm just gonna carve them. And like most steaks, not all, but most steaks, we wanna carve it against the grain. So how do you know what way the grain is running? So you can see here, you got grains running that way. Really obvious in this one. So we wanna cut against it, so we wanna cut this way. And personally, I'd be pairing this with a lovely classic Greek salad. A little bit of extra olive oil, because olive oil is delicious. There we go. Let's have a little taste. Delicious, lovely sweet lamb, nice smoky flavor. The oregano and lemon comes through. For me, it doesn't get much better than that. Delicious lamb, a lovely light salad, how good. So next up, we're gonna do a method that I bang on about all the time, the reverse sear. And we're gonna do it on these here lamb racks. Why are we gonna do it on the lamb racks? Because these things are expensive. And by reverse searing, you're gonna lessen the chance of you butchering the cook because no one wants an overcooked lamb rack. So first up, the lamb. Now the best place, you know what I'm gonna say here, to get your lamb, especially your racks, is from a butcher, because they're gonna be able to French it like this for you, which means take off all the meat around these bones, makes it look all pretty. And then you can ask for a specific type. So do you want the intercostal muscle and the belly fat removed? I think for this recipe you do. Take that off, and then they're gonna be able to chime it. So that means there's this bone here. There's usually like a line of bones here. They'll put it through their bandsaw and take the chime off. And the benefit of getting your butcher to take this chime bone off and to take this kind of outer intercostal muscle and stuff off is that you can cook it a little bit rarer because you're just left with this beautiful loin of meat, which is like, I guess, the fillet of the lamb world and the beef world. We're gonna make a nice little rub, kind of South Asian inspired. You're gonna start with some garam masala, maybe a teaspoon and a half. And then half a teaspoon of fennel powder, which is ground up fennel seeds. It's strong stuff, so you don't need a lot. 1 teaspoon ground coriander and a teaspoon of mustard powder. 2 teaspoons of salt. Give it a mix. So we're just gonna use oil again for our binder. And we're gonna go pretty generous with this rub. I think lamb's one of these meats that can hold up to some stronger flavors. Lamb's a slightly stronger flavor than some of the other meats. So I've got my offset smoker running at about 100 degrees Celsius. They're gonna take about 35 to 40 minutes in there. We're looking for an internal temperature of about 48 degrees Celsius before we pull them out and rest them. If you don't have an offset smoker, you can use a pellet smoker, you can use a gas barbecue with a lid, use one element on very low, put them at the other far end. You can even use your oven if you want to the smoker. So you want the bone side down, and I like to put the bones in the middle. We'll check those in 30 minutes. So now that's reached that temperature of about 48 degrees Celsius, we're gonna pull it out and let it rest for a good 15-20 minutes. Then we'll seal it really hard on the grill, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's just let that chill for a while. I'm gonna hide it from the flies though. So I like to sear these on a flat grill as opposed to the char grill. And it's purely a preference thing. You can do it in either way you want. I find that with the flat grill though, you're gonna get a more even sear. And I'm just gonna do one at a time because I don't wanna muck this up and it will happen pretty quickly. You won't need any oil. There'll be enough fat still in that cap to render out. And we're just trying to get a nice bit of color on there. And that's it, nice sear on the outside. We don't need to rest those anymore. They've already rested, so let's carve them up. I'm gonna serve these with some really lovely fresh cucumber raita. Now you can absolutely serve these whole to the table, but I do suggest that you cut them up. It just makes it easier. Little lamb lollipops, and they're super easy to carve. Just go between the bones, run it down straight through. That fly is gonna really annoy me. There you go, reverse seared rack of lamb, cucumber raita. Deluxe. Let's see what it tastes like. Terrible, I bet. For such a lean piece of lamb, that's still beautiful and tender, lovely cooked all the way through, and those nice mild spices just really amplify and add to that flavor. Delicious. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you're having a barbecue soon. Mitch has already subscribed because he knows if he's not, he ain't getting any of this delicious food. Next up, the last one, maximum effort, but maximum reward. This is delicious. So we're gonna do smoked lamb shoulder, inspired by my mate Kareem from KG Barbecue out in Austin, Texas. I had it there last year and it was absolutely delicious. He's pretty secretive with his spice recipe, but I think we can reverse engineer it. So pretty simple. I got my smoker set up. It's running at about 120 degrees Celsius. And then for the spice rub, we'll make that first. The main component, obviously apart from salt and pepper, is sumac. So sumac is, oh, it's delicious. It's quite citrusy, sort of 25% sumac, about a teaspoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon's pretty strong, so you don't want too much. You definitely want to taste it. About the same of ground cumin, fresh ground black pepper, and salt. We'll mix that up. And then the shoulders. So lamb shoulder. Now, I highly suggest go to your butcher. I think lamb shoulders, when you're smoking them, you want to take the shank off because you get a much more aerodynamic piece of meat. And the shank just has a tendency to overcook in the kind of the 5 hours that this is going to cook for in your smoker. I also get them to take off any of the kind of underbones here at all. So all you're left with is 2 bones. This big kind of triangle bone here, quite a big flat bone that runs through this part. And then you have the main, I think it's the femur, I'm guessing the femur, like the main bone there. So you only really have 2 big bones in these pieces. And you end up with these really great aerodynamic pieces of meat. Go to your butcher, see what shoulders they have in stock and ask them to trim them for you if you want, or trim it yourself, but you're not gonna find a lamb shoulder trim like that anywhere else other than your butcher. So then the fat. So sometimes these will have a lot of hard fat on the top like there, and you wanna kind of trim a bit of that off. You don't want too much of it on there. This side's all fine, this amount of fat's fine. This side needs a little bit of a trim, and there's quite a big deposit of fat here as well, which I'll get rid of, any of the hard fat. Other than that, they're pretty much good to go, but just be careful. This is kind of the amount of fat that you want. We're gonna cook this at 120 degrees for the first 4 hours. We're gonna crank it up, and for the last hour to help render any of that fat, but any thicker than that, you're gonna struggle to render it. So all I need to do on, this one's fine actually, it's just this big nugget of fat here that I'm gonna take off, because that will not render. And then there's a bit of extra fat here. Just gonna trim that down slightly, and we'll keep that fat and render it. So I'm just gonna use olive oil as the binder, both sides. Then we'll go on with our spice rub. So like I was saying, this is about 120. We're gonna point them with the thinnest, pointiest end towards the heat source. And that way the airflow is gonna kind of roll over it nicely. Just slightly stagger them. We'll come back in 4 hours and check those. So the lamb's been in the smoker for just over 5 hours, almost 5.5 hours actually now, and it's looking great. So the last hour, I've cranked it up to 150 degrees. And what that does is just help render the fat. And we're looking for an internal temperature of about 94, 95. But more importantly than the temperature, you need to feel around. You shouldn't have much resistance at all. You should be able to poke through and you don't feel any resistance. We're gonna pull these off. We're gonna rest these for at least half an hour. You can rest them for even an hour, or you could even put them into your oven, set to like 60 degrees and rest them in that. The longer the better, really. So there it is. Some beautiful smoked lamb shoulders with KG barbecue inspired spices. And then with this, I would serve a real simple tahini dressing, some flatbreads, and then a real chunky salad of tomatoes, cucumbers, and red onions. I guess we should have a taste. I only made the salad because my mum told me to. It's delicious. It's rich and it's lovely and moist still. It's got great smoke flavor, and that sumac really comes through. Nice little zingy vibrance. The tahini helps as well, bringing it all together, makes it lovely and creamy. Weeknight meal, lamb rumps for sure. If it's the weekend and I'm hanging out at home and I'm trying to impress some friends, pull this one out. They're gonna love you for it. Go and use your butcher for the amazing resource that they are. Talk to them about lamb rumps, ask them about what lamb shoulders I've got in, and ask them to trim them up for you if you want to. Huge thank you to Australian Lamb for sponsoring this video. Like this video if you took anything from it, and subscribe if you're not, and we'll see you next week for another recipe. Peace.